Welcome to my tutorial for O-Diver. This is for PC. This is a free shooter. I downloaded about 229 free shooters last month, and this was one of them. And it was quite a good one. And it was pretty challenging too, so I thought it would be a good one to cover for a tutorial. So here you can see I'm just playing on normal, which is the default, and arcade mode. So basically the way it works is you have the health bar, and you only have one life, but if you lose that life, you will continue at the beginning of the last stage you got to. But there is quite a few stages, so it's pretty lengthy. The game, when edited, was about an hour and 17 minutes with all the deaths edited out. And my completion time on the game, I'll have to bring it up and see exactly what it was. Let me see. I remember it took several hours. I actually left the PC on for a few days because I was working on a few different games. So I wasn't really able to play any of the other free shooters I had on the PC since there is no save feature, unfortunately. So, you pretty much have to leave the game running if you're going to work on it. But you do have unlimited continues, and you can pause it or leave it on the continue screen. So that's basically what I did. I just left it on for a few days as I was playing some other games as well. So yeah, it took me around 3 hours and 31 minutes to beat. And I did it probably at the end of last month. So it was it's not completely fresh in my mind. I'm probably about, maybe almost 2 weeks from when I beat it now as I'm recording this. But I got kind of backlogged. I played through around 71 games last month, so it was hard to catch up on recording some of the tutorials. I only do them for certain games, if I think the game was decently challenging usually, or if it's a quick tutorial that I can do where I have good information to make the game easier. Some games there's really not that much to say, as it's pretty, evident from the video. So in this video I edited out all the deaths, so you're only going to see the successful runs of each stage. But as I said, there are unlimited continues. So the way the game works is you have two main firing modes to start with. You have your split firing mode, which kind of splits up into two. It's a wishbone shaped firing pattern. And what that does is it's good for hitting enemies that are, out to your sides. It has a nice spread to it, but it leaves the center of your ship completely vulnerable. So you do have to get good at positioning your ship so that the two streams are actually hitting enemies. And then, aside from that, you have your straight firing stream, which the straight stream is good for mainly hitting when you want to do more damage to enemies. You see, it's early in the game here, and I didn't realize that I could have just used the dual stream to take out those multiple streams of enemies, which is probably what I would have done if I knew the game better. But this was the first stage, and I wasn't really familiar with the game mechanics yet. I was still trying to fuck around to see what the controls did at this point. But if you use the narrow stream, you'll do more damage to bosses and shit like that. So when you want to damage something more, try to use your straight stream. And that's going to do more damage. It hits with more potency. So when you can line up a straight shot, you're going to do more damage. But if not, if you need to play it more safe, like I did when I was on the sides there, then use your side streams and you can still do damage. It's just going to be quite a bit less. So now you're seeing the continue screen, and that's just to show that I did waste a continue on the next stage. So whenever I did lose a continue on the next stage, I show that screen, which in most cases I did. I usually did die on a stage and have to learn it. Because even early on, the game is not that easy. It is challenging to where I had to at least learn it. The problem is that when you beat a stage, if I remember right, you don't get any health back when you beat a stage. So that's why most of the time I did die on the next stage I got to, because I didn't have, that much health left from the previous stage. So one interesting thing the game does is it does switch angles a lot. So a lot of times you have some bizarre angles. Sometimes they're a little bit strange to get used to. But you will see that the game does that. Now, as you can see here, you also have a sword attack. And there's actually two different types of attacks. One, I believe the way the controls work is that the sword attack is tied to the button where you use for your straight shot, I believe. And or it might be the spread shot. Maybe it's for the wider shot. But anyway, if you tap the button instead of holding it down, you'll do your sword attack. You just have to find which button correlates with that. It's either the spread shot or the narrow shot. But each button has two attacks on it. So your other firing button, if you tap it, you'll do this little spike that comes out of the front of your ship briefly. And that's good for deflecting certain types of bullets. I mean, like if a bullet is coming directly at you, you can use it for that. But it does pretty good damage if you're right up on a boss or an enemy that takes several hits. So it's useful for that. The most useful attack in the game is the wide-swinging sword attack you see. Because that can erase bullets. So you can constantly deflect bullets and stay alive that way. Which is a huge mechanic of the game. And the thing with it is that it's on a meter that says sword. So if you spam it too much, you will wear out the meter. And you have to wait briefly for it to recharge. It doesn't take long, but if you're abusing it, it'll leave you open and you'll probably get hit. So you do want to use it as needed. You don't want to just mash it the whole time, obviously. So that's about it for the controls. It has some interesting mechanics. But, the controls are pretty simple. There are a few parts that change it up as far as the gravity changes on one stage where you actually do some platforming, which is kind of cool. But yeah, for the most part, if you think you're going to get hit by bullets, or if you don't even want to try to dodge the patterns, utilize that sword swing and you can take out most of the bullets. So it's definitely a strategy. It also damages bosses when you do it up close to the boss, so it can be decent to get some extra damage. But most of the time you want to stay far back and use the straight stream when you can. So here you have a little dodging. You just don't want to touch the walls. It's a very simple dodging sequence. And I believe there is going to be the next boss fight now. So yeah, for this one, instead of trying to line up with the boss and put yourself in danger, I would recommend using the spread shot here with the two streams and try to move either a little bit above or below the boss and get that that diagonal shot on the boss. It leaves you a lot less exposed, even though it does take longer to take the boss out this way because it is a weaker shot. A lot of times it is the safer shot to use for a lot of fights. So if you play it safe, it's a pretty damn easy boss. You can try to shoot it directly with that straight stream, but it's hard because of the moving wall. So I would recommend just staying above or below it and using the spread shot. I found it to be a pretty easy way to deal with it. So again, you can see I use the continue here, and I just, instead of showing myself dying in the next stage and wasting time in the tutorial, I just wanted to, cut the bullshit out and just kind of get straight to the demonstration just to show the game. Successfully executed. So now you can see the angle does change a little. It's kind of like an overhead shooter. The angle does change pretty consistently in the game, which can kind of throw off the gameplay a little bit sometimes. Sometimes it's a little bit awkward at parts. There are some parts where you got to move around in a circular pattern, and you're locked into a circular movement, and it's a little awkward. It's pretty cool once you get used to it, but even when I adjusted to it, it was still a little bit awkward at times. So it's not always to the game's benefit that it switches up the angles. It's not always like a helpful mechanic in the game. But it does make it feel kind of unique. So with these double streams, this wishbone shot, you can get those two streams of enemies as they spawn. But it does get pretty aggressive here. You can use your sword to take out both the enemies and the bullets to make it easier. See, I did it a little sloppy there, but you really don't need to take damage there if you do it right. I believe this is more like a cutscene where you just ram into that ship. At times you don't have control of the game. It just kind of goes into a weird camera angle. This really reminds me of what could have been like a PS2 type of shooter. You know, especially with a little refinement, but it looks like something that could have been on the PS2 that would have been a pretty good shooter, but it could have used a little bit more refinement. So here is just a dodging sequence. This is where the gameplay changes again. And this is really kind of awkward because you're trying to dodge something, but the missiles are coming from behind you, so it makes it kind of irritating, kind of weird to dodge. I was mostly moving in like a circular motion and just hoping that I didn't get hit. You know, I would try to dodge if I could see them in time, but it was a little tricky to see exactly what the fuck was going on. Some of the sequences are a little sloppy. Like I said, it doesn't always work for the game's benefit when it tries to switch gameplay styles and angles and shit like that. See, like, this is pretty fucking awkward. You really don't have a lot of time to really deal with that, so you may take a few hits. Again, I was mostly moving in kind of a circular pattern and kind of hoping I didn't take damage because it was hard to really see exactly where those fucking things were going to land, you know? Not only do they hit pretty quickly, but your ship moves very slow, so it doesn't give you a lot of speed to work with to dodge shit. Though maybe you could memorize where these things land. It's probably not random, but I didn't play the stage that much. You can get by kind of just circling around and, you know, trying not to take too much damage. There is another button I forgot to mention, and there is a button to turn your ship around and face another direction, but it is kind of weird the way it works. Like, sometimes you can do it, sometimes you can't. It depends on the section that you're on. So you can always try it and see what it does. But a lot of times it won't work because the game doesn't let you turn around, you know, unless it's a certain area. So for this part, you may be able to turn around. I don't know if I realized at this point of the game that I was able to turn around. You know, because I don't have a manual for these games, and there's also not any videos of a lot of these games or information, so I had to figure out most of it just fucking around. So again, I lost to continue on this stage. This is the next stage. But yeah, it's good to experiment with being able to turn around for certain stages. It can be good. I think I beat some stages without even knowing that I could do that. So, I mean, you probably don't need it for most of the stages, but at one point I think I may have needed it, and then I started fucking around with the buttons. So this stage is kind of cool. It's mainly where it's the first time that circular control mechanic shows up where you're locked into a circle and you can only move in this circle. It's a little bit like Gyrus, but it is kind of awkward because of the camera angles. It's not the best gameplay sequence. I mean, it's okay, but it's a little weird. So mainly what you want to do is, I found that the spread shot worked pretty good for this part because it gives you two separate streams. Even though it doesn't do a lot of damage, you can hit multiple targets at once. If you want to focus on just one of the targets, you could try your straight stream. And your shots are going to kind of curve based on how you move around that circle. It's kind of awkward. See how it curves? Same thing happens with the straight shot. So you can use the straight shot to take out one target at a time. It may be better to use the spread shot so you can get hits on multiple targets. So you can experiment with that. I could have also been using the sword, and that's probably what I would have been doing, watching this now. The sword is really good at close range, and it will deflect a lot of the bullets, most of them. So you can basically mash the sword attack up close to things and take them out faster. But you can also play it more patiently and just keep your distance, and it's not too bad if you just play it like this. But you may want to experiment with using the sword and the straight shot. Once you take out all the turrets, then this central thing comes up and you can hit it. And you want to try to shoot down the missiles. You may be able to use your sword to take them out as well. I just don't remember. I probably should have used the straight shot on this thing because I think it would have done a lot more damage since it's only one target. But then, I was still learning the controls at this point, so I wasn't really good at figuring out everything. So some shit was kind of sloppy, but it does work either way. It's really not that hard to dodge this thing, so it's a pretty easy boss. I think that's the end of this stage. Yeah, and this one, I don't know if I use the continue here because I don't see the edit. But it's possible I did. The double stream works good here initially to take out these multiple spawns, so you can wipe out both lines of enemies at once with the double stream. So you may want to use it for this part. Now is a good time to start switching directions, ship directions. So use that button to turn around. I don't remember, exactly what the buttons were. I was also using an arcade joystick, and sometimes the games are mapped to strange buttons, because it kind of randomly maps them, I think. So I just used however it was set up. Those are the buttons I used. But since it's on PC, it depends on the controller you're using too, probably. And I don't know if this game lets you map your buttons specifically. I just I just played it as it was when I plugged in the arcade joystick. But yeah, that part's pretty easy. As long as you switch directions. If you're facing one direction, it may be tricky, but as long as you realize that you can turn the ship around. And yeah, I have to see this because I actually don't remember. Since I only beat this once and it was a few weeks ago, it's kind of like I'll remember shit when I see it. I think for this part you have to dock onto this little thing here. You just have to try to line up with it, and then you'll kind of just magnetize to it. It's very, very easy. I don't think I've ever failed that. Maybe it is possible to fail it, though. Yeah, so now you have a boss. If you want to play it safe, you can kind of just stay either above or below it, like we did with that boss that had the wall in front of it that kept moving. That way you don't have to fight, you don't have to get directly in front of it that way, and you can avoid the lasers at least. Even though it does less damage, it is a good way to get consistent damage. It is a little aggressive with the movement, so you gotta kind of try to move out of the way. I probably could have used the sword spin attack. I didn't even think about that at the time. I think the sword spin would go right through those streams of bullets. So, use your sword and attack with your sword and then move through the bullet stream to avoid them. I think that's what you do. I probably could have used the sword on these big lasers too, but I wasn't really doing it. See, it works. The sword pretty much deflects any kind of bullet in the game, so it's good to try to use it as much as you can. It recharges fast too, so I mean, while you can't spam it the whole time, you can let off on it. Well, see, now I'm using the sword effectively to dodge shit a little bit better. So that's what I would recommend doing. I was playing it sloppy in the beginning. I was starting to understand that the sword is, very useful. Kind of overpowered even, But the game is designed pretty well around it. If it didn't have a cooldown, you could just rapid fire this shit and pretty much be invincible. I remember the game having quite a few stages. It goes on for quite a while. It's about, like I said, maybe an hour and 17 minutes without any deaths. Once it's all edited. Okay, yeah, now there's another form. I think for this form you can't fire at all. I think you're trying to break through the atmosphere or some shit, so you're not able to fire. So all you do here is just dodge left and right. It's very, very easy. You only have to survive until that timer runs out. I had my buttons mapped in a weird way, so a lot of times I would hit the pause button and then I wouldn't be able to exit out of it. Because I wouldn't know what button would exit me out of the menu. It's not standardized like playing on, an Xbox or something like that, so sometimes the button mapping is weird. So yeah, that's it. Pretty damn easy. That previous form is a little challenging, but if you spam that sword, you really can go through a lot of the bullet patterns. So yeah, I definitely wasted several continues on this stage. This was one of the harder stages up until this point. I think this was the hardest stage up until this point. So, it can be pretty challenging. It's not too bad when you know what to do, but it's a little challenging initially. So hopefully this pause screen doesn't last too long. This is actually my first time seeing this edited version. So yeah, with this you just have to take out these streams again, and I believe you can turn around. Yeah, you can turn around and take them out. So this part is pretty easy as long as you're aggressive. Use the sword too. That if you think you're going to get hit, you can take out enemies with the sword as well, and bullets. It's easy to underestimate how useful that sword is. It's also really good for getting up close to these turrets and taking them out, because it destroys the bullets that the turrets shoot out, and it does a lot of damage to them. It will take them out a lot faster. And you don't have to worry about taking out all the turrets. Just, take out the shit that's in your way. Maybe try to take out a few of them. You mainly just want to go through the bullets, because now you get an overhead view where you fight the turrets as somewhat of a boss type of fight. And it's a lot easier to take them out here. You have a lot more space to move around. Just be careful not to crash into them, as you do take damage for that. But if you can get close with your sword, you can hit both of them at the same time with your spin attack, using the sword. And it's pretty safe since it deflects the bullets that they shoot out. So it also takes care of the enemies that are trying to charge into you. So that's a good way to deal with that. The sword works very good here. The sword and the spread shot. Just move up or down, and when it's about to shoot its laser, move, in the opposite direction. So very easy. And if you're using your sword, you should take it out pretty fast by alternating your movement like that. So now you have some basic waves of enemies. They do move pretty fast here, though. They're pretty aggressive. If you use your sword, though, you can chop through a lot of that shit, including the bullets. So if it gets dense, just start mashing your sword button. And you should be able to take care of most of it. I believe sometimes you do earn health back some way. I don't really know how it happens. I notice it sometimes when I'm watching the video, but Unless I didn't get hit at all yet on this stage, but I wasn't really paying attention to that. But I know I've gotten health back before. It's usually 1 bar of health or something like that, but I don't know how that's triggered. So this part is kind of a memorization sequence. It's just basically moving out of the way where the missiles are coming. For the gunfire, just use your sword. I find that to be the best way to deal with those, is just mash the sword button. You may get hit occasionally, but I'm not sure the best way to deal with them. I just mash the sword, and it will deflect some of them. And then you just got to move out of the way of the missiles, which is just a little bit of memorization. Like, as soon as these carts open up, you want to be moving to the other side, basically. You know, as soon as you see that gap open up between the train carts, you want to try to get in there and switch sides. I think that's the main way to dodge those. So this boss can be a little tricky. Use your straight shot when you can to do more damage when you're down here. For the missiles, you know, you can use your sword, or you can just move out of the way of them when they fall from the sky. They do fall in a pattern. So when you're above the train, you can get a few sword attacks in for a little extra damage. See, the missiles move in a pattern. You see how they kind of close in on you closer to the train? You can kind of move with them, as you saw me do. Try to use your straight shot. I was a little aggressive there in the midst of everything. It's probably better to stay on top of the train when you can and spam your sword if you have it available. But if you're running out of sword, then don't stay on top of the train because you'll probably get hit by the bullets. But it's really not that hard. You know, there's a few parts that are a little tricky, but once you learn the stage, it's really not too difficult. There's definitely some harder stages later on. The game has some pretty challenging stages. But I would say that was the hardest stage up until that point. So now you have kind of a dodging sequence from a third... Well, it's always a third-person perspective, but it's almost like a, almost like a first-person style game. But it's basically just some simple dodging. You just want to move like one notch either to the left or right usually. Sometimes you may have to move 2 notches. You'll get a feel for this pretty quick. It's usually just moving either once to the left or once to the right, just one movement, one little tap. And sometimes you stay in the middle. That's pretty damn simple. This was definitely one of the better free games out of the 229 free PC shooters I downloaded. So yeah, now you're going to be back to this gyrus-style control scheme where you're stuck on the circle. And as mentioned before, it does take some adjusting to it. It is an awkward angle with the camera moving around and you moving around. Also, your shots move in a strange curve, so you got to kind of place your ship to where it's not directly lined up with the enemies a lot of times, so it's a little awkward. But kind of cool. I mean, it's something different, but it is a little awkward to control. There are some stages where I think it's implemented better and it doesn't feel as awkward. In this stage, it's a little awkward because you have these things shooting at you from all directions and the missiles coming down. So it can be a little awkward to dodge shit because you try to dodge and then you move in a weird position because you're fixed to a circle. You can move into the closer circle or the outer circle, I believe. You kind of have, I guess you can move within that whole gap, but you're locked into that circle, so it is kind of weird. But use your spread shot mainly and just kind of stay away from them, try to dodge. Probably the best thing I can say for that. Here you can use these barriers to kind of give you some protection and use your spread shot to kind of shoot around them and damage these turrets. Also, you can use your sword if you feel like that will help you block these beams. You may want to mash it every once in a while. I didn't really feel comfortable enough to go point blank to him and mash the sword because I felt like I might get hit from the side or some shit, but maybe that would work. I don't know if I tried that. I was trying to play it safe. I did find that using the barriers was not helping me a hell of a lot because a lot of my shots were getting absorbed by the barriers. Even though the barriers protected me, it was taking a long ass time for my shots to get through, and I would still get hit through the barriers sometimes when they moved. So I found it safer to just go on the other side of the barriers and just be more direct. Though I wasn't really comfortable with mashing the sword button either, so I kind of just stayed in the middle. So this part can be kind of tricky. You want to try to move to the sides and dodge everything. I don't know if your sword will help you here with these huge things. Because these projectiles are massive. I don't know if the sword can help with that. I may have tried that before and it didn't work, so I'm not sure if that would work. But mainly try to dodge them, if you can. You may want to try the sword to see if it works, but if not, just dodge them. You just have to try to dodge carefully and keep firing. It can be a little tricky to dodge just because of the strange movement pattern with the circle. So now we are approaching the halfway mark of the game. Not mission-wise, just as far as the length of the game. I think some of the missions are longer. There's some pretty challenging missions later on. That last one wasn't too bad. Like I said, these camera angles can make it kind of weird to dodge shit sometimes because you're moving at a slight angle, which is, it can be like a little offsetting. It's not quite the same as dodging your bullets in your typical overhead or side-scrolling shooter because the angles do kind of change the way you move. So sometimes you're going to move into bullets because you're not aware of the perspective the game is trying to, show you. So it does happen. It doesn't play as clean as your typical, just regular 2D side-scroller. It's a little sloppier because of the weird camera angles that are constantly shifting. But you get used to it. Spread shot is good here since there's so many enemies. I find the spread shot to be the most useful because you're going to be able to take out more enemies. It's not like the enemies take that many hits in these sections, so you don't need the power shot. So the spread shot will probably work better to take out more enemies. Now this part you may not be able to switch firing directions. There's certain parts like this that lock you into one direction just to make things harder. And it's unpredictable when the game's going to do that. Okay, it looks like you can switch directions here, but there are segments where you can't. And it looks like you should be able to, but it won't let you turn around. So the only way you find out about that is by trying to turn around, and then you can't. So, you want to experiment with that. But if it doesn't work, that's just how the game is. Sometimes it just doesn't work. It's dependent on which section you're on. So if you get overwhelmed, use your sword, definitely. Especially for these big guys, you can take them out faster. This part does get pretty aggressive, pretty dense. Staying on the side of these large enemies makes it easier than being in the middle, I think. Because they have these lasers that shoot you, and they have other shit that'll shoot you in the middle, so I kind of like staying on the edges of those large enemies. But then you got to watch out because the enemies also spawn in on the side, so it's easy to get rammed into. So, mash the sword if you're unsure, because if the enemies do come out on the side, your sword can take them out sometimes. So it's one way to deal with it. Don't underestimate how many invincibility frames you can get by just mashing the shit out of the sword button. Don't be afraid to spam it, but just watch your meter. If your meter is emptying on the sword, then, it's going to have to cool down for a little while. Not too long, though. It's very brief, but it's enough to get you damaged. So you do have to keep an eye on it or just get used to it. I don't think I ever really looked at the sword bar, but you do get used to it. Use the sword definitely in that part. Get in the middle and just sword all those motherfuckers. You'll take out the whole ring. Easy way to do it. So now we have a boss. You can use your spread shot, kind of stay to the sides. I don't like being directly under the boss because the lasers are so fast. So like I said, I like to offset on the side a lot of times, as you see me doing. You don't have to do that, but you can play more dangerous with the straight shot. But a lot of times I don't feel comfortable doing that. I mean, I like to play it safe when I can, instead of redoing the entire stage, But so I was just taking it slow. So just staying on the sides. It's pretty easy. You got to watch out for those bouncing balls. They always bounce in the same pattern, though. So just be aware of where they're bouncing to, and get under them. Don't be in a direct path of where it's going to bounce. But as long as you're paying attention, it's not too bad. Sometimes there's a lot of them to deal with, so it can be a little tricky. But it's really not too hard. You can also get close to the boss and mash the sword for some damage, but you really don't need to do that. It's more dangerous to do that. If you're going to go under the boss, mash your sword button so that if it does shoot a laser, you'll deflect it. Just as a little precautionary move. And that's really about it. It's really not too hard. This stage is pretty tough, though, because there's a lot of dense enemy patterns, and it's pretty fast. There's a lot of shots. So it can be a tough stage. Probably one of the harder ones up until this point. The difficulty does start to escalate, though, as any good game should, so it's pretty well done. I really do like some of the unique mechanics of the game, though. It did come up with some interesting ideas. I don't know if they're completely unique, but a lot of these shooters have some really cool concepts and things that they do that I don't see done in other, commercial shooters, commercially released shooters. So I have been seeing a lot of that with these free shooters. Now, since I'm pretty new to PC gaming, maybe this experimental stuff is done a lot with these free types of shooters, fan-made games, So I'm starting to explore that more now. So I can't say if it's completely original, but as far as commercially released shooters, there's a lot of new ideas here that I haven't seen before. So it has been cool to check these out. I actually just started PC gaming pretty much. My good friend gave me a 2013 PC he had for gaming. It's outdated now, but it's a good one for me to use for Steam and for downloaded PC games, just because I have an emulation-focused PC that's just for emulated games, but I don't put that one online at all because I don't want to get any viruses or any shit like that, because it'll fuck up the way those games run. So for this PC now, I'm starting to fuck around and download like actual PC games now. So I'm going to be playing a lot more of that shit. But they're going to be more like these kind of games, more indie-style, DLC-style games. For the modern shit, like PS5 and all that shit, I just run those on the consoles. So yeah, use your sword. You've dealt with similar parts before, like the train. So use your sword when it gets overwhelming. Mash the sword button, kind of bust through. This stage can be kind of tricky because you have to fight at least 2 bosses from what I remember. Now, the first one that you deal with, really not too hard. But, as a whole, it can be kind of tricky because you do have to survive for a while. So here, it's pretty good to use your sword and spread shot as usual. Use the sword to take out multiple of these vehicles at once when they're close together. It makes it very easy. So for this one, all you got to do is move off to the side slightly and use your straight shot. It'll kind of curve. Your straight shot's going to do the most damage, and it's, I think it's the best way to go for this fight. And when it gets close, mash your sword button, get those extra hits in. It also kind of protects you while you're mashing your sword, if it does. I mean, you're probably not going to be shooting at you when it's close up because it does it right before, but it may shield you from some excess shots. See, sometimes there are bullets that are in your way, so it's good to mash that sword button when you're up close. And as long as you kind of stay slightly offset to the side, it makes it very easy to dodge the boss and deal with it. Just keep mashing your sword for the bullets and for attacking up close. And the main thing is just to make sure you're slightly offset to the side of the boss when it does reach you. If you're lined up with it, of course, you're going to get run over, and then you do take damage from that. So, it may be a little tricky not to be right in front where the boss is going to end up, but you get used to it after a while. You just got to be off to the side slightly from the way it's charging at you. So you have to get a little bit used to what side to be on, but after a while you'll recognize the pattern, see how the boss is moving, and you'll remember which side to be on. So for this guy, you can use the sword to deal with the missiles when they get close to you, which is probably the best way I found to do that. If you don't want to be directly in front of it, use your side, your spread shot, so you can get be off to the side a little bit. You won't do as much damage, but it makes it easier than being right in front of the lasers. You can also use your sword, obviously, to deflect bullets and lasers at any time if you need to. But, sitting in front of the boss and mashing the sword button is not always the best way to dodge stuff. Sometimes there is a little bit of an opening where you will get hit. Now here I'm just doing some of the sword swings as a little bit of a precaution to try to take out the missiles if they're about to hit me. I don't know if you can dodge those explosions from the missiles by using your sword, though. It's something I would do to try to negate damage. But this boss can be kind of tricky. But it does repeat the same patterns again and again, pretty much. But I do like playing it safe by staying on the side and shooting it along the sides with the spread shot. Now for this part, I don't know if the game lets you switch directions and shoot behind you, because sometimes you can turn your ship around, like I said, but I don't remember I'm guessing I probably tried it and it didn't work, so I'm guessing you can't do it there. Because I already did know about the mechanic where you can turn your ship around. It took me a while to figure that out, but by this point I already knew about it, so I'm going to assume you can't do it here. So you just want to use your sword when the ship, is behind you. Use your sword to take out the bullets and try to dodge. And it does take a while, but it's really not too bad if you stick to this method. You can always get up close too and do extra damage with the sword too if you want to be more aggressive. I was getting kind of sloppy here, but it ended up being good enough. The sword does do pretty decent damage. The main use is to deflect bullets, but in some parts it's good to use to take out turrets and shit faster. It seems to do extra damage. It's not always easy to get a straight shot on a target, so sometimes it's easier to go up and just mash the sword. But yeah, that's it. You just got to repeat the pattern for a while. It's kind of a long boss fight. It can be tricky because you have to deal with, quite a few enemies and a little mini boss. So yeah, now the game is starting to escalate a little in challenge. So you're going to deal with some just regular enemies for a little while. Pretty easy though, just using your spread shot. You always want to try to take the enemies out aggressively as they spawn, try to take them out immediately. You can switch directions in this stage, at least in this section, so you're going to want to do that when the enemies approach on a different side, make sure to turn around. And all you really got to do is move up or down slightly, adjust your angle of your shots just to take out the enemies. It can be pretty quick. The enemies are pretty aggressive, but it's really not too hard because you always have your sword to fall back on if you're getting overwhelmed. Mash the sword, take out the enemies with the sword and the bullets. Sometimes you're going to want to switch sides rapidly, as you saw me do there, because enemies sometimes will sandwich you, so you want to try to take out both sides of enemies. This part is very easy. It's basically just a wall. And you're going to have some bullets to dodge. The main issue is going to be the missiles that come down while you're shooting, but as long as you keep moving up and down, you shouldn't get hit by them too much. I like to kind of move either up or down because it seems like maybe it confuses where the missiles are going to come down at, but I'm not sure how to predict where the missiles are going to come down or how to lure them, It felt kind of random to me. But I usually just moved up and down and kept shooting. You want to use a straight stream because that does the most damage, and there's really no reason to use a spread shot on that part. It doesn't benefit you at all, and it'll take longer to take the wall out. So now you have a multi-layer boss fight. It's multi-stage, but there's easy ways to do most of the parts. So for this, stay on the bottom and just use your spread shot and use your sword to take out bullets and shit like that. If you get the angle right, I think you can take out the missiles with the spread shot as well. It does get easier as you get to the next phase, though, because there's like some bullshit you can pull with positioning. There's a few positioning tricks. Use your straight shot when you have just the top part left. I think that works pretty well. So now I think you can start pulling some bullshit with your positioning. So if you stay down here, you can take out each segment. And it's fairly safe. I mean, you may need to deflect the laser on the bottom with your sword occasionally. Or just move up or down. You see, there's a pattern to it. I'm starting to get into a rhythm with it. It was a little sloppy, but you don't have to fight the whole thing at once. You can just take out one section at a time. It may take a while with the weaker shot, but eventually you get there. And then once you've taken out that bottom laser gun, you can use your sword on that bottom part, or you can just fire with your weak shot. The sword will be quicker, but you don't have to use it. You can see these parts are pretty easy once you know the positionings. This one I think is super easy. I think all you got to do is stay on the bottom and use your spread shot. I think it does take a while, but it's completely safe. So, unless you're in a rush, there's no reason to take damage here. And, slowly you will take out all the guns. You can move up a little bit once you've taken out the bottom, too. But that shot that you have will take out the projectiles that come out of the guns, so you don't have to worry about using your sword to block or anything. So I believe this may be a pretty challenging boss. This may be the hardest boss up until this point. Not the part that we just did with the large robot. That part's pretty damn easy when you know where to position yourself. But this guy can be tough. I remember this took me some attempts. I believe this is the hardest boss up to this part of the game. It feels like a final boss, but the game actually goes on for another 28 minutes or so. So quite a bit of game left. It's a little bit more than halfway through the game. I remember thinking, the game was kind of cool, but I was like, fuck, man, this shit goes on for way longer than I would have liked. I was in kind of a rush, though, because I left my PC on, and I was only playing a little bit at a time of this game, so I was kind of in a rush to get it on my kill list, because I was going for, I ended up beating 71 games last month, like I mentioned. I was going for a mass quantity of games, so I didn't want to spend, 3 hours or 2.5 hours on a single game, really, unless I really had to, but I was trying to go through a bunch of those free PC shooters. That was one of the main sources of games last month. So this one was holding me up for a little while. But mainly, you can see the pattern here is kind of just moving up and down constantly to try to avoid the lasers. And occasionally, you're going to want to use your sword to deflect some of these things. And this phase is kind of difficult because, there's a lot of lasers being fired at you. But I try to keep moving up and down, and I try to, dodge the laser as best I can. This pattern is pretty easy. Just stay in the gaps and move slightly up or down. Don't worry about trying to follow where the boss is and hit it. Focus more on dodging the bullets that it's shooting at you. And, your gunfire will eventually hit the boss and damage it. But don't make that your priority. Mainly trying to dodge, try to dodge the bullet patterns first off. And if you hit the boss, then, that's a bonus. Sometimes you want to use your spread shot so you can play it safe and stay either above or below the boss. And other times you want to use the straight shot if it's directly in front of you. You get extra damage that way. It'll probably take some practice to get this part, because it does have a lot of different patterns that it goes through. Some of them are pretty tricky. It's going to be more practice than me explaining exactly what to do on each section, but it's very doable. So this stage actually changes up gravity, I believe, where you're actually doing a little bit of platforming. This stage does have kind of a tricky boss that kind of jumps around. It's a small boss, and it's a little irritating, but I think by this point, you've already beaten harder stages by this point in the game, so it's really not too bad. But you can see the game is getting more aggressive. You can see even these small enemies are now shooting out a ton of shots and moving really fast, so it is kind of dangerous. Even if you spam the sword, you do run out of sword attacks, and it's easy to get hit. So I like to kind of move left to right and use my sword to take out the bullets. Try to shoot, spread shot to take out as many enemies as I can. But no matter what, it seems like there's going to be a lot of fucking bullets and enemies on the screen, so, spam the sword attack to stay alive. Try to stay on the side of these large enemies. You can use your sword as well. You can also stay on the side of these laser barrages for the most part. Soon it's going to switch over to this little bunny hopping platforming kind of shit, which is pretty easy. But the boss does appear soon. One of the bosses, it can be pretty tricky. I don't remember if there was multiple bosses in this stage, but there is one boss that's kind of irritating. See, so now it's kind of weird. Now you have to jump to move up. So it becomes kind of like a platform. You can't actually move up normally. You have to do these jumps to get up in the air. Like that. So you have a little bit of an obstacle navigation platforming kind of area now where you just jump over these barriers. The barriers will damage you, so you do have to jump over them while clearing out enemies that are in your way. Remember to use your sword while you're jumping in the air so that you can kind of bust through the enemies and kill them, and also not get hit by the bullets. It can be a little tricky, though. Sometimes it's a little tricky because of the shitty camera angle to see where you're going to land, and you may land on one of the barriers. You might be able to jump over multiple of them at once as well. Maybe that's what you're supposed to do there. I would usually get hit by at least one of them. I mean, because the camera angles were kind of... I did feel a little shitty with that. So now you have the boss. You're going to want to use your spread shot most of the time and focus on, dodging and using your sword to take out the projectiles. This does go on for a while because you do such little damage, and the thing does move a lot. You can deflect the green wave shots, though, with your spread shot. So those can be deflected just by shooting at them, like you did with that big green boss. So you can deflect those, but the blue lasers and shit, you do have to either deflect with your sword or just not be around them. I guess they're not blue. Yours are blue, but the lasers, basically. Sometimes you can get up and do some sword attacks on the enemy when he's close, but I don't recommend doing it too much because it is dangerous. But mainly want to use your spread shot and just, dodge the bullet patterns. Use the sword while you're in the air to dodge the lasers. It does go on for a while, so that can make it kind of a hard fight. It is one of the harder bosses. But it's going to do the same patterns again and again, so, get used to the timing. Remember, when it goes down low, it's going to charge across the screen on the ground, so be ready to jump it when it does that. But other than that, it's going to do the same patterns again and again. But it's tricky because it does multiple attacks at once pretty much, so you do have to dodge multiple different attacks. It can be tough because it takes so many shots. But you do get into a rhythm once you know the patterns and what to expect. You're able to play pretty safe. Definitely one of the harder sections in the game, I would say. It's a pretty tough fight. The game never gets extreme or anything like that, since you can take multiple hits and you can deflect with your sword, so that helps a lot. But it can still be pretty challenging. It's at least a moderate difficulty shooter, I would say. But yeah, now the boss, is getting close to being dead. You can see my buttons were mapped in a really weird way on the joystick, so I have Sanwa buttons on my joystick. I believe I was using the one that had Sanwa buttons. I have a few modded joysticks, but the buttons are so easy to hit just by if you nudge them a little bit, they'll go off. So it can be a little confusing. The buttons are spread. They're all kind of mapped in a weird fucking way. But yeah, that's it. It just goes on for a while. And I'm sure there's a faster way to take it out. So now you're seeing on the next stage, I did continue again. On most stages, a lot of the stages took multiple continues, a lot of the later stages. Some of them took me a while. So use your sword here, definitely. Use the spread shot to try to take out what you can. But the sword will keep you alive if you mash it a lot of times, to an extent. You still have those gaps where it has to cool down. Or when it finishes swinging, I think you're open for a split second. But it does give you quite a bit of invincibility frames if you abuse it. So now this part is deceptive. I was actually getting hit in this part because I didn't realize that the scrolling background, it looks like you're going to hit into the walls, but there are no walls here. So you have full left and right movement and full up and down movement on the screen. Don't worry about hitting into any walls. The way it looked visually, it made me think that if I went to the left or right, I was going to hit into a wall. But once you realize that there's no walls in this section, it becomes a lot easier. It's still pretty hard, though. I mean, there's a lot of shit going on here. You're going to want to use your sword a lot and get on the side of these large enemies. It is tough not to get hit at all in this section. It does get pretty dense. The game is definitely getting more aggressive at this point. When there's large clumps of bullets, obviously use your sword. It makes it easier to just bust through. Try to dodge as much as you can, obviously, without spamming the sword, because then when you do need the sword attack to dodge some, undodgeable shit, you're not going to have it available if you use it too much. So you want to try to dodge some of the shit on your own, obviously, and save the sword a little bit. But you don't have to be super conservative, like I said. The game, they give you a lot of sword. I mean, it charges up pretty fast. So you'll definitely learn where you can abuse it. The main thing here is trying to dodge these fucking missiles. It's hard to see where they're going to land. So my recommendation is take out those enemies fast so that there's not any more missiles being launched. Try to just sword them to death or take them out fast. So this part's kind of tricky. You have to take out all these little fucking, I guess you could call them turrets. Laser turrets, I guess. But you got to take them all out. And they take a lot of hits each, so it can be tricky because the camera angles are pretty fucked here. I mean, the movement is very fucking awkward, to say the least. I found the movement here to be pretty shitty. It's one of the shittier movement sections. So, of course, you can't bump into the laser turrets as well, so it does make it kind of shitty. When you do have the ability to use your straight shot, try to use it because it will take them out faster, but a lot of times it's just safer to use your spread shot, hit multiple turrets at once. Sometimes you can get up close and use your sword too, but it's kind of dangerous to do when all the turrets are going fucking crazy. You also see me using the straight needle style weapon, which is pretty much the same as when you mash your sword button, but it's on the other shot. And what that does is that's kind of just a straight needle. I think that might do a little bit more damage. I never figured out what the difference was really with that. I think it may be a little bit more powerful than your sword. So maybe that's a better damage dealing weapon to use on bosses. Might be something to experiment with. Take a look at the damage and maybe experiment with that. See if that little needle dick move does more damage than the sword swing. Because the sword swing seems like it's more designed to deflect bullets all around your body. You know what I mean? Than just to use for offense. So the spike move might be more of an offensive damaging move. It was hard for me to notice, and a lot of times on bosses it's kind of hard to tell, even though the health bars are there. Sometimes it's a very small difference, but when you're doing, 50 fucking hits on the boss, a small difference does add up. So you might want to test it out. This part's kind of tricky not to take damage just because of the walls, and you're kind of closed in with all the bullets and enemies spawning right on your ass. So I do kind of spam the sword to try to bust through, but it's hard not to get hit by something. So I recommend just kind of spamming the sword and trying to get in those narrow openings. If you hang back for too long, you see what happens. You get mobbed by the enemies. So I don't know of a real safe strat here. You see, I barely get to the boss with any life, so I had to play it really well. Because when I get to this boss, I have no health, so you're going to see me play it super carefully. I think it takes a very long time, but you'll see a safe method. At least you'll see what the safe method is. But this fight's definitely going to drag on for a while. I probably should have edited this one down, but, fuck it. At least you'll see a safe method on this boss, which can be kind of tricky. But, I figured out how to pull some bullshit. I'm usually trying to exploit shit. So hang out in the bottom right corner here for a while and just use your spread shot. And you're going to use your sword when the bullets get a little too close to you if you feel like you're going to get hit. Now, it is easy sometimes to get hit by the bullets because of the weird camera angle that's constantly switching, as you can see. It makes it harder to dodge than it should be. Otherwise, this would be a very easy pattern, but it's a little tricky because the camera's constantly shifting, It makes it a little awkward. It's a weird angle. But, just keep firing your spread shot and use the sword if you think you're about to get hit. You can use it pretty heavily here because you only need to use it when the bullets are getting close. So it should give it enough time to charge up. You can also get close like I'm doing here and use the sword on the turret to get some damage in. I think I beat this boss. I may have beaten this boss maybe the first time I got to it or something like that, or maybe close to that. So I was playing it super safe, at this point. I don't think I knew what the boss was going to do next. So I did not want to get hit because if I got hit once, I would have been dead. So I had to play it super fucking safe. So that's why I was being extra careful. Because remember, I was just looking to beat the game. The tutorial is just adding, some commentary after the game is beaten, showing all the successful segments. But I did not refine this video at all, so it was whatever succeeded is what got through. But yeah, you can see how carefully you can play this. It will take some patience. I think this goes on for quite a bit. This may be why the video was longer than it should have been. I think this one took probably over 5 minutes, if I'm guessing. Maybe like 7 minutes. I remember it being long. But basically, just stay mostly to the right side of the screen in the beginning. And, use your spread shot and use your sword. When they come out, try to hit them with the sword if you can. But you see, I do not move to the left, for any reason. The only way I'll move to the left and deal with the turret all the way on the left is if I've cleared out the other two turrets. So I'm patiently waiting for the turrets to come out that I want to hit, which are the ones, the middle one and the right one. But I don't really fuck with the one all the way on the left until I've dealt with the other two. So I'm just playing it super fucking safe. If you have some health, obviously you can be more aggressive. Or if you just know how to fight this boss. But like I said, I think this was the first time that I got to this boss. So I think that's why I really didn't know what the boss was going to do. So I figured I would just go to the old fucking, the old methods, the old fucking exploits, just being real fucking cheap. And I'm trying to patiently pull bullshit. But it is a very, if you don't have any health, it's a very easy way to deal with it. It's just going to take a while. So once all the turrets are dead, the two turrets are dead, which is probably going to be soon. You'll know because it'll show them exploding, so you'll know when you break one, as you can see there. Of course, when the turrets retract, they're not dead. They're just retracting back into the body, so make sure they're both dead. But once that happens, now you have the last turret all the way on the left. And I guess you have these bullets that still spray out, so be careful of that. You do maybe have to get a little bit more aggressive on this part, getting closer. So I think this part is where it gets a little bit harder. But you can use the sword as needed. But the bullets do get kind of fast, so you got to be careful. It was getting a little intense here since, like I said, I didn't know what the boss was going to do. I don't know if there's anything after this turret, though. I don't remember that. But at this point, I really didn't know what was coming next. So I was just trying to play it as safe as possible. It's kind of tricky because of the fast bullets. And like I said, the shitty camera angles are the only thing that make this even slightly challenging. Otherwise, it'd be super easy to stay in the gaps. But they keep switching the camera angle on you when the camera moves. But if you're patient, it's really not too bad. Use the sword. You can see you can pull a lot of bullshit in this game. It's not the most tested game, and I'm sure that's because, it's kind of some kind of fan-made game or something like that, so it doesn't have the kind of testing that would go into most full releases. Okay, so this is the last mission, I guess. So I think this fight goes on for a while. It's pretty much just the final boss, but it goes on for a while. Many, many phases. Very cool, actually. The coolest part of the game. But you can pull a lot of bullshit on the beginning phases. So here you can see major positioning bullshit with the spread shot. It's really fucking safe. You can see exactly how I'm positioning myself. You just take out each part as I'm doing. It's very self-explanatory, and you can pretty much do it safely. You don't need to be in the direct line of any of the firing, any of the bullets or anything. So you'll see this is very fucking easy. I think this was the part I was thinking about where I pulled major positioning bullshit. The last part and this part. I think this part. Well, maybe not. Yeah, this part is not too much positioning bullshit. This is actually kind of tricky. So, yeah, this boss can be pretty challenging. But the first part, you can completely bullshit, as you saw. But for this part, it goes to that gyrus-style control, and it's tricky because the boss is always moving, and the camera angle is kind of weird, and the movement's weird, so you want to try to angle your spread shot. I recommend mostly using a spread shot to hit multiple parts of the boss at once. And obviously, you know when you're connecting because it flashes red when you hit a part of the boss. Those are the parts you can destroy. So I like using spread shot early on. to try to hit both of the backpacks. And I try to hit the front of the robot when I can too, but the first thing I'm trying to take out is the 2 backpacks. Try to keep moving so, if you strafe around the boss constantly, it does throw off the boss. But you still have to worry about those missiles where they're going to land, so be careful with those. Try to keep moving if you can. It confuses the boss if you keep strafing around it. And when you get a chance, try to line up and get those streams right on its backpack. Sometimes the boss won't move that much, and you can get in a lot of damage. You kind of just sit there a little bit. But you do have to kind of keep moving in increments, because if you stand still for too long, you're probably going to get hit by the missiles. The laser is also very dangerous too, so you don't want to be directly in front of the boss. Same thing here is you try not to get in front of the boss directly, because that's when you're going to take damage. So the first thing I really want to do is take out, if I can take out the middle of the boss's face, that's the best one to take out, because that's the most dangerous. But you can easily take out the sides first too. You can do whichever you like. I think I went for the middle first, because the middle I found to be the most dangerous. So try to angle your shots so that they go into the middle and take that out first. You can also try just a straight shot, but it's only going to be one stream of bullets, and even though it does more damage, it may be trickier to hit with, since the boss, is dangerous at close range. So you may want to use the spread shot so you can stay a little farther away from the boss and still damage it. It does take longer, but I think it's worth it. I did end up taking one of the ears out first, but if you can take that middle part out first, it's probably going to be better. But you got to take out all 3 parts, left, right, and center. Similar to what you did on the previous form. But if you circle it, like I said, if you stay on the edges, it's hard for the boss to hit you with its fire. So try to stay along the edge of the boss and not directly in the middle of it. So this part was tricky at first until I understood it. So when it does its straight slash, you're going to move slightly to the side to dodge it. So that's pretty easy. You're going to know when it does the straight slash, because it has different attack animations. So everything is telegraphed. All its attacks are telegraphed by the animation. So if you see it rear its sword straight back, it's going to do a straight slash, a straight overhead slash. If you see it kind of rearing out to the side, it's going to do a horizontal slash. That's it. So if it does the horizontal slash, you just need to be all the way back, and you'll be out of range and it won't hit you. If it does an overhead slash, you got to move just to the left or right slightly. Now, don't move back to the left or right after it's done with the overhead slash. Don't move back immediately, because the shot does linger, and you will take damage if you move back immediately in front of it. As far as damaging the boss goes, you want to try to get closer to it so that your bullets connect, but don't prioritize getting close to the boss. It's better to stay back most of the time, because eventually the boss will move in close and it will end up taking damage from your bullets anyway. So focus mostly on dodging the horizontal and vertical slashes. Just pay attention to what it's doing, and once you get used to the animations, it'll be muscle memory to be quite easy to dodge. You're not able to use your sword on that phase to deflect any of the damage, so you do actually have to dodge that shit. But it's easy to read once you pay attention to the animation. So this is where it kind of gets hard. This is where the boss fight gets pretty tough, because now you have a long final phase. Now you can see I pretty much had most of my health, because I was able to do pretty well on all the other phases. With the strats I mentioned, and with a lot of practice. This did take me some practice to get all the phases down. So for this part, I like to kind of stay close and use my needle dick move, which is the straight version of the sword, I guess, where you mash the straight version of the sword. So I use that. I think I found that did extra damage over the full sword attack. So that did good damage. It doesn't really protect me from getting hit, but it does do a lot of damage. So use your spread shot here and kind of stay offset to the sides a bit. Now I believe you can switch directions and fire behind you. I think you may have to switch directions to aim in that direction, but just do that and keep trying to move to the sides. Use your sword to deflect as needed, because you may need to get in the midst of shit. So use your sword when you see the lasers coming at you. I didn't play too carefully here. Now I found that moving with it using a little needle dick move is working pretty good. This part can be kind of tricky. I think this is the hardest phase, because these things are all over the place and they ram into you. And this is when the boss is almost dead, so it's really trying to fuck with you at this point. And I didn't have a good strat for this. I just survived because I had a lot of health left. I did good in the rest of the boss. I was able to survive that part. But at that point, I say be aggressive. Use your sword and just try to take it out fast. Maybe use the needle dick move. And that's pretty much it. It is kind of a tough final boss, but once you learn all the phases, you can have enough health to where you can kind of muscle your way through that end phase, which is basically what I ended up doing. Now, I didn't have any real refined strats for the game, except for a few positioning tricks. But I didn't spend enough time on the game to really master it. It was a one-time playthrough. But I figured, I felt like some of these things would be helpful in a tutorial. I thought some of these strats would be good. Not that there's going to be a single person who watches this video and actually plays the game, because it's a very obscure game. It's a free downloadable PC game. I think this may be the only video playthrough of the game, though I don't remember completely. Some of these games had no videos. I don't remember if this was one of them, but I think it was, because I don't remember being able to I couldn't check any videos to see where the game was going to end. So I don't think I could find videos on a full playthrough of the game. This may be the only one. So hopefully it is helpful. It's at least maybe interesting to see a different game with some commentary. If you have any questions, let me know, and thanks for watching.